Alright, a quick demo here to talk about how to pick up a portion of the image as a new image by itself, making it a custom brush, and also how to work on making the background transparent. I'm talking about the scenario where you have some images you've drawn, perhaps with the particle brushes, and it might be the baddie grass, or it might be something similar to that, and you'd like to pick it up as its own image. You could use the lasso tool here and sort of pick that up, right? Select it first and then go to brush, use the select it as a brush, and now you have this in your brush as a custom image, but it doesn't have transparency on the white part in the back. Let me see if I can turn the opacity fully on. There you go. You can see that it's got a fully white opaque background. So one thing you can do is right click the custom brush selection tool here, and when you right click it, you can choose a different part to be transparent. You can choose the green parts if you want the grass to become transparent, or click on the white background. So now it's ignoring the alpha channel that it had initially for the mask or the selection of what part is opaque, and instead you're selecting, for instance, the white background. That has its limitations because you might have actually some white parts inside of the grass itself. You might have white lily flowers or some other parts that are white, and you need to adjust here how much of that you want to blend away as well. The problem is that it's keying to color, so anything that's white or close enough will become subject to removal or to turn transparent. But it is one way that you can work with it, and you know, if you trim it down far enough, you will get rid of that white glow. You can see if I erase the image to black, by default it has quite a bit of white glow here. Let me zoom into that a little bit. You can see that there's quite a bit of white glow because of the anti-aliasing along those particle brushes. So it blended in the original color from the background, which was white. And so that's something that you can't really totally avoid, but to some extent you can reduce the impact of that, or the perception of it, in a couple of ways. If it's a single static image, one thing you can do is use the brush transparency and no, wait, where is it? Yeah, I think it is here. Transparency. Transparency. I'm trying to remember where that is. There is a tool here somewhere. I can never find it for some reason. But oh, pre-multiply correction. That's what it is. Right? When you do the pre-multiply correction, you're telling it, wait, this image was rendered or was picked up from another image that had a white background. Now, by default, it's looking for black, so you can choose white, or you can choose the primary or secondary color if they are different from white or black at this point. So you can really key to any other color and use that to say not making it show that transition. Like if it was black in the background, you might see it originally like this, and then after the treatment it will turn like this, more of a transparency progression there. So that can help also to some extent alleviate. Let me see if I take, for instance, the default brush here like so, and then go to the brush, pre-multiply correction, make sure it's white, and copy that. Alright, so it's not totally gone. There are some more things we might want to do, and one of those things is to shrink the alpha selection, the mask, inside the brush. So you can do that here again under transparency. You can shrink or grow it. That's actually sometimes used to add a border around it with the grow feature. Alright, so if you grow it, you can see now, in fact, let me use the shortcut for that. You can see that it's growing sort of an outline around it. And if I instead use the shrink tool, you know, you can adjust it one way or the other to reduce that size. But of course, every time you use that and then you increase it by growing it and shrinking it again, it's following its own algorithm, not the shape of the original brush. So you do have some capabilities there that might work for fine-tuning the selection mask. It is best if you have a background color that is kind of the same color that you will use it in the end, but you really don't know. You never know exactly how you're going to use it. Are you going to use this grass on a scene with a dark tint or a dark shade or reddish, a sunset or a bluish sky or plain white or dark? You know, there's all sorts of different scenarios or scenes where you would like to use this this brush. So I feel it's really better if you can create these brushes, these images with the alpha already on it. It will be a cleaner painting. And so what I recommend, instead of using the style when you use the particle brushes, instead of using the style which says line, click on this little menu and let it go to line plus alpha. And what that means is that it's going to also render the selection of the lines into the alpha channel. So when you paint this, you can see you immediately get a sort of a selection mask with the marching ants indicated here. Let me undo that and perhaps go a little bit faster. You can see that each of these trails are also being rendered with a selection mask. Instead of using the marching ants, which make it a bit difficult when there are so many, a bit difficult to really recognize what's going on here, what you could do is turn the marching ants off and simply turn the alpha overlay, and then that way, well, you know, against the black background, you're not gonna see much of that highlight there. But let's see how we can use that, perhaps with some winter branches. Let's go down to the winter branches. There you go. Let me Control D to clear the selection mask, erase to white, and so now the winter branches look like this. That's the default set, and you see there's a lot of holes in there, a lot of gaps, and that's definitely going to be very difficult to pick up as a custom brush if you want to turn this into dark branches against a transparent background. Now you could do that. You could again pick it up with the custom brush selection tool and do something like this, and it will make it transparent on white or whatever the secondary color is by default, but that might not be tight enough. So if you right click on the custom brush selection tool, you can go and further adjust the tolerance on those. But the problem is that you then usually also lose a little bit of the detail, and there's still a little bit of glow, of that white glow showing in many cases. So let's use, instead of the shrinking lines, let's use the shrinking lines with alpha, right? Shrinking lines plus alpha. I think in an older version of Dog Waffle, it may not have had the room to show the whole length here of the text, so the menu item might read something like shrinking lines plus, but it's definitely available. And when you do that, when you enable the particle brushes in this way, it's now rendering not just the brushes, but it's rendering the alpha, the selection mask as well. Now we don't see it here, so let's go and enable the marching ants. There you go, you can see it. Or you could keep it just with the color, the pink, showing sort of an overlay mode. But the key thing is that with that you will have a nice selection mask. If I pick this up with the brush you selected as brush, I now have, if I go to preview and oh wait, I'm still in this enabled mode. Let's go to the custom brush. Now you can see it, and it's got already a better type of let me go and erase this black. It's now already got a cleaner. It still has a little bit of a glow there, but it's going to be less, and it's going to be easier to remove that as well. So let's go back to the brush and pre-multiply correction. Let's say, yep, that was white. Let's go back. So now we have much of that whiteness gone, and the little bit of whiteness that's left is really what's coming for the most part from the brushes themselves, from the twigs. Now, sometimes you're not going to have the ability to think ahead and paint it with the alpha channel. So what do you do if you actually have lines that are drawn like this, and you want to pick it up now as a custom brush, right? So let's, for instance, erase to white, and perhaps you'll make it still the shrinking lines, so they start a little bit thicker even, like so. Perhaps you'll give it a little bit of randomness, randomized by value 1. So the twigs don't all look the same. Maximum particle per emissions, maybe 2. change a little bit the initial velocity. Let's give it 9 and let them go a little bit farther with 12. So you can see some variance there, some changes in these particle brushes. If you use the left or the right button, you might also get some tinting. So for instance, bluish with the left button, greenish with the right button. Although these are pretty dark, so making them bluish or greenish is going to be very subtle differences. Let's go and erase to white. And perhaps one more thing, the lifespan. Let's change the lifespan here to be a little bit longer. And there you go. All right. Let's make them very brisk. There you go. And so now we have this set of twigs. Let's go one more. Don't like this one either. Maybe we need fewer particles here. Let's give it 444. It's still too many. Let's give them 44 or 33. That will be very few. Yeah, so it's kind of sparse. So here we have something that we can pick up, and how do we select that? That's one thing that we can do if we want to build a selection mask. Well, one place you could start with the magic wand. There are a couple of selection tools, but probably these will not, the rectangle selection is not going to be very useful, because we want to really trace or go along those twigs, those branches, and we can't do that with the rectangle selection or the oval selection either. The lasso tool can only give us a little bit sort of a general selection outline. It's not going to give us every twig exactly as we want them. The magic wand could help a little bit. The problem with the magic wand, though, there are some limitations for those holes or the gaps in between, right? I mean, if we click on the outside with the magic wand, that's fine. We have the outside of the object selected. We could then go to the selection mask and invert it. And now we have just that selected. And as we zoom in, or perhaps show it with the overlay, alpha overlay, we see though that there are some gaps. Like this hole here that's still white did not get selected. Now if there's only a few, what you do is you use the shift key and hold the shift key down and click on that as well. So you end up adding or right click to remove the selection. Left click to add to the selection, right click to remove with the shift key down. Make sure you have that shift key down. So you could go, if you have just a few of these openings, you could go and select those. Now they're not very clean selections. It's not using the anti-aliased approach. If you want that, what you should do is go here with the tolerance or with the anti-aliasing up here in the upper left corner. Again, still with the right click, you shift click and it gets closer to the twigs. And that might be just good enough. Not always will it be though. So you will find times where you need yet another approach. But this is really the art of making a sophisticated selection. And sometimes you use the white color to key on it. Sometimes you use the selection mask with the magic wand, like I'm doing right now. And sometimes you use a combination of those. Right? So you could start with the white and then give it a little bit of tolerance to break into the edges. Maybe that initial selection here, I'm doing this again so that it's actually going in. I don't know if you saw the difference here. Let me undo that. See how it still has quite a bit of a white glow? Because the first time I selected with the magic wand, I did not use the anti-aliased mode. And if I now use a shift click to click on this again, or right click on it, it's going much closer into the anti-aliased area. And so that's actually a much cleaner selection. But still, there will be parts where you wish you could go and fine-tune it some more. So this might not be the full, but it's actually a pretty good selection already. Look at that. Yeah. Sometimes you just do it once or twice over what you've already done and it goes in even tighter. And you can also work with the tolerance. Alright, so now what I have selected is the branches, the twigs, and the pink part on the outside is the non-selected part. And so one thing I need to do is perhaps invert alpha. Oh no, wait, there's something I must have selected. See here, there is a marching ants selecting, showing just this part. Maybe I had let go of the shift. So let me do undo and undo again. Okay, so that's better. And yeah, so no magic there. So it really still will need a little bit more work. So hold the shift key down to keep adding to the selections until you're kind of close. But let's do one more on the outside, a few more on the inside. Here's an example where we can click it once, click it again, and you might see it go further and deeper into what's already been selected. But yeah, sometimes you'll need to work with the tolerance. Give it a unit of 1 tolerance there, and again shift click to right, so that might actually add a little bit or remove to the selection. It's really going to be a bit tricky there. Oh, I think I failed to hold the shift key down. Let me make sure I have this right. Okay, there it is. So shift key, this time I'm going to give it even more. I'm going to give it 2 units, and shift key down. There you go. Yeah, but you see it's going to be difficult to select those. So how do we select those? Or how do we work with different selection techniques and combine them? Right, so one thing that I'm going to do is, first of all, make sure we don't lose this current selection mask. Let's make sure we select and store the alpha. That will store this alpha mask, and maybe you want the inversion of it. You can use that and then replace it back in. But let's now look at a different technique, which is to select against that white color. So what you can do is you can select either some of the preset colors or really the brightness. Select by the dark areas, that's the shadows, the midtones, or the lights. And that one, actually in this case, this probably will work pretty well. If you select by the shadows in particular, all of the dark parts here will be selected, and then as it goes into the grays, it might not. Maybe you want the grays as well. So let's select them separately and store this one. Store alpha. There you go. So this is the dark parts. And then we can say select by midtones. Now it's mostly selecting the grays along the thin twigs, and store that one. So you now have 2 stored areas, and we want to combine them. So one thing you do is, for instance, you place this one in, and you say replace it. So we now have the dark parts in place here as the active selection, and then we add this selection here. So you add this selection, and now the 2 have been added into this active set, and you want to store that one again. Make sure you don't lose this one. So you have store alpha. So now we have a combination of this one with this one resulting in this one. Right? So you can actually see that if you replace this one or you replace this one, you'd have one or the other. But we did an add, we added rather than replacing. So initially we replaced that sets the initial framework. Then we add this, and now we have this actually as a result. And so that's one way that you could combine multiple selections that are in different ranges of brightness. If you have sort of a grayscale scenario here, this is pretty much a grayscale scenario. And there are other types of selections you might want to work with. You could actually go and key on a particular color. Right? So when you do that, you say, well, okay, let's go look for white, and then give it a little bit of tolerance. Also work on the hue saturation. If you have lots of colors, that's probably better, RGB, or it's just the difference, the value difference. So you can say, okay, let's select the white part and really only look for the white parts, or then zoom in a little bit to give it more tolerance, and it will tighten it a bit more into the darker grays than just staying on the light grays. And there are some other subtle changes you can have here, and you can also pick a different color, whatever color you want to zoom in on here. So for instance, if you don't want to select the background and then invert it, you could select the black parts here in the center, the dark parts, and then simply indicate how much you want to select just that. And notice how as you change the tolerance here, you'll see the marching ants. Let me zoom in on that a little bit, and we'll see it better. You'll see the marching ants kind of come closer or branch out a little bit more. So select by color key, and so I'm selecting my my white parts here, or the black parts, and then I'm going all the way tight on the left side. So you see here the marching ant is kind of on the inside of the twigs. And then as I'm going into the opposite other side, without all the way, just giving it like this, you can see that it grew out deeper. Now this line is not showing how far it goes, that's just the midline, the half line. So it's actually going a little bit further, but it's reduced in how much of it it's getting. So that selection, those marching ants, keep in mind, it's not exactly where it's cutting off, it's at the midline, because the selection mask itself is not an on or off thing. It's not a do select all or select select none. It's not a single bit. You have a full byte of resolution there, and so you can have some gray values of selection depth. And but anyway, so this is something you can use to adjust a little bit how much of that is actually being selected. Here's a case where you see it with the RGB difference. If the tolerance is just 1, you see very little is being selected, because I went to one of those dark tones, and only those here are exactly the same dark tone. And as I'm branching out, as I'm increasing or relaxing the tolerance, look at what happens here with the marching ants. It's giving it more and more. It's allowing it more and more of that selection until it selects everything when you're at 255. Maybe you want to go at 254, or you could go at 250 and then expand it a little bit. Let's try that. Let's give it something like, like say 240 or so, and then give it a bit more on the tolerance, so you can do the selection and grow or shrink the selection. You can do that here at the selection level, or you can do that later in the brush. After you've picked it up as a custom brush, you could do that there too. So let's say grow alpha a little bit, just by 1 unit, and make sure, hopefully it's not growing out too far. If it is, then you might want to undo that, or you might want to shrink it again from there. Anyway, so we now have a selection of this twig or this set of foliage and branches, and what we'd like to do is pick this up as a custom brush. If you know exactly how far it's reaching on the selection, one thing you could do is just with that custom brush selection tool right there, this one, go and drag and select it. Right, that would be something like this. Use the custom brush selection tool, use the crosshair, so you can actually disable that if you don't want it, but it's good to have the crosshairs here in this case, and then simply select something like this and give it enough tolerance around it. But that's the thing, is that you don't know exactly how much tolerance, how much margin you need to give it, because is it going just around here for the right edge, or do you need to go this much or even farther? You can't really tell, because those marching ants are only giving you the 50% separation, the transition. So this might be good. This might just not be perfect yet. And so another way that you could do this is, if you have that selection mask still there, is to actually go to the brush and say use the selected as brush, and that one will go to anything that's currently selected, and then it actually clears the selection mask. So that's another way to select it. And of course, the one thing you'll want to do, if that's a good one or you want to work with it some more, make sure you store it and manage it. And then you could, for instance, shrink the selection a little bit. You could go to brush, transparency, shrink. So it's a little bit tighter. Now that looks a bit ugly. That's just become too tight on that selection. So keep that in mind. That's not always going to be the right thing to do. Here I'm going to just click that. That's why we like to store it before we start messing with it. So or even go like this. I'm going to do a selection that's a little bit less, a bit more relaxed to begin with. So let me go again to select by color key and select this one, and just give it a bit tolerance there, something like this. And now I can go and invert this. I did select the white part, so I need to invert it. Selection, invert. So now we have it on the outside there. But you can see there's definitely a lot of the light gray that's still being selected. Let me turn the preview off. See how there's all this white part, those very thin branches are transitioning with the anti-aliasing. They're transitioning to white. Let's grab on those, and then later we can shrink the selection a little bit. Let's do that in the brush. So I have this selection. Let's go pick that up as a brush. Okay, that's our custom brush. We can turn the preview off or on now, and you can see there is this white glow, but we'll fix that. Let's store this one first. Store and manage a copy. There you go. Probably don't need this one here anymore. And so now what we'll want to do is see if we can reduce that brush glow a little bit. That's this one, pre-multiply correction. Let's say we had it on white. Okay, that's a little bit better, not a whole lot. One thing we could do is perhaps shrink it a little bit. So brush, transparency, shrink, just 1 unit. That's a little bit better. And you could do that 2 or 3 times. Sometimes you have that much of it that you just need to do that a few times and gradually disappear that transition. And so now one of the final steps obviously is, once you have selected your custom brush or your your grass and foliage or tree. Once you have done that, how do you actually save it as a file? It's in the brush now, right? Or I mean, if you had it like this with the selection mask, well, you could just save that image. Maybe you want to crop to it first, so that you don't save an image which has all this garbage around it, all this space, unused space around it. One thing you could do is use the image crop tool, right? And that will, and still with the alpha channel there too. So crop tool, and you could say, let's go. See, it actually goes. It zooms right onto the. Let's see, right click. Let me do that again. Cancel. So it's got the image is this big. The selection mask is a fairly small part of it. No problem. I'm going to go to the crop tool, and look what happens. It's kind of zooming into the outline, to the bounding box of that entire selection. So it's actually, boom, there it is. If you zoom out a little bit, you can see that it's snapped onto that bounding box. And you might just be done at this point. You could say, yeah, let's crop to that, right? Or maybe you want a little bit of a margin, so make it a little bit bigger. Right, give it a little bit of margin to the left and right. But if you crop right away, it will have the perfect bounding box of everything that's there to be grabbed. So crop to that, and okay, the alpha channel is not showing. Let's go see if it's actually still there. Let's turn it on or off. Alpha on. No, it's actually gone at that point. Okay, so that crop did not help us so much in terms of keeping the alpha channel there. So one thing to do, I thought it was actually going to keep it, but maybe that's my bad. What we can do though is when we work with the brush and we have that same selection mask there, we can right click on the custom brush selection tool to perhaps adjust a little bit how much of that we have, and pick the white background as the one to key on, and then adjust it so that we have just about the right amount of transparency and less of that white glow. If you did that with the alpha channel initially, we wouldn't need to do that anymore. So where do we have that collective one? Was it this one? Replace. Oh yeah, that won't work anymore because that's a stored copy of the one before the cropping. Let's just use this. So answer the question now. In answer to the question, how do we save that if it's in the brush? Because if it was in the image, then we can certainly simply go and save it in one of the formats that supports the alpha channel, such as the Targa format. Even BMP, if there is an alpha channel on it, it will save it as well. PNG too. So there's a couple of formats you can use. TIFF as well. I would go though, if you have it in the brush, how do you save that? Well, the brush for the custom brush has its own save option right here. Right, that's something to keep in mind. File is not the only place where you can save or open images. You can, on the image, you can save them. No, not on the image. On the brush, you can save them. You can also send it to the clipboard, but keep in mind that that will not save the alpha channel. The transparency mask does not get copied into the clipboard. But you can save it, right? And so from here you can save it with whatever options you want. The formats, a couple to choose from here. And while we're talking about saving, there's other things you might want to save. A brush image, and then there's animations, and that's where you go and open an animation or save an animation. The DWA format, dog waffle animation, is what this will look for. But if you have other formats, you want to use it in another program now, you can save it to a sequence of images, or you can save it to an AVI if you have a good codec. I would recommend a codec that's lossless, such as the Lagarif codec, and that way you get some small size, but still a good compression, that is, and also lossless, no loss in the data. So still a good working format. All right, so that sums it up for a quick intro on how to perhaps do something like this here. Let me go and restore that. That is, create new image. There you go. And how to work from something like this with perhaps even more more images and flowers, organic effects. Let's see, we have flowers, and we have some bigger distance. Let's see, we have some red flowers here, and then we have some blue flowers also. And again, we like to pick that entire thing up as a custom brush and then save it with the alpha channel so that the white background is transparent. And so, just to recap, one way to do that, if you didn't do that selection mask as you drew the particles. One thing you can do is work your selection perhaps based on a color. In fact, if you know the colors of your particles, see if you can choose a color for the background that's not in those particle colors, right? If you know you have mostly green parts in the grass, use something like orange, the opposite color, or blue. But that's difficult if you also have blue flowers and orange flowers, because they will become bullet holes, they will disappear. So that's one of the big challenges when you paint in a single layer like that, and you want to try to make the background transparent. So let's see with the lights. If I pick the lights and then invert it, there you go. So now we have all of these flowers still selected. Yep. And all of the grass, all of that pretty good. And so we can go brush, use the selected as brush, and you can see it here now. And first thing I would do is store it, store and manage a copy. Next thing I would do is see if you can work on the pre-multiply correction. Try with black. It's probably not the black you need, so let's try that first. And yep, that wasn't it. Let's go select it and try with white, pre-multiply correction, and there you go. Alright, that's a little bit better. You might need to do that and then perhaps a little bit more. It really depends on how much of that glow there is. And the fact is that there is also some glow in the brush itself. You can see you know, this particular image actually had some of the white edge on the brush itself. If you disable the preview, you can see even where the twigs, these branches, were painted on top of others, it was turning white, and that is the coloring of the grass itself in this case. To some extent you really can't get rid of the glow, because the glow is actually on the inside of the grass helm. Alright, so you do have some glow that's along the anti-aliased edge, such as this around here. You see how the anti-aliasing makes it go fade to white, but there's also kind of a fade to a very light green as it reaches the tip of the branch. So that is a difficult scenario here to work with, because you just cannot get rid of the white altogether, because that white is actually inside the branches. Alright, thanks for watching this quick intro. Well, not so quick after all. There's a lot to discover and explore, and it's great to waffle with it.